Welcome to the Everyday PM podcast, the podcast where we discuss project management principles for your everyday life. My name is Campea, and I'm a certified project/program manager with a decade of experience working for retail, consumer goods, healthcare, and tech industries. I'm super excited to welcome Ray. And Ray, I am going to not try to butcher your name here. Maybe I will leave the last name pronunciation to you, but I'm so excited to welcome Ray to the podcast. He is the author of the bestseller Accidental Project Manager, which I know I have in this room somewhere, Zero to Hero in 7 days, and project manager for over 30 years. Ray, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have you.
Thanks, Anne. I'm excited to be here as well. So it's great to be here and to be able to help accidental project managers. And for the record, my name is pronounced Frohnhoefer, but I answer fine just to Ray.
Wonderful. And I have butchered plenty of people's names on here, and I just want to make sure that I get it correctly. So thank you for pronouncing it for us. So Ray, you have led a dual career with more than half or more than half of that as a trainer and educator, right? You've spent time designing and delivering project-oriented experiential online courses. You also are the founder of PPC Group, which offers publications, training, and consulting with a focus on aspiring new and accidental project managers. So I am, again, very, very excited to just bring your breadth of knowledge and experience to the podcast. And we've got a few questions that we're going to go through today. But before we get started, why don't you take a brief moment to introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, sure. So as Anne mentioned, I've had a dual career, starting almost at the very beginning. Where I would be a project manager during the day, and then at night I would put on my educator hat. And when I was with General Electric, I used to drive around the Capitol Beltway and teach classes in computer science to GE students. And as I moved more into project management, that shifted. I moved to San Diego eventually around 1993, and in 2000, developed a relationship with UC San Diego Extension and have been teaching with them for about 18 years now. Wow. In total. And so I've just always enjoyed doing training along with, my project management work. And in 2013, I semi-retired, which was an opportunity for me to start PPC Group. And I realized that what I really wanted to do is help aspiring, new, and accidental project managers, and that I would focus on a three-pronged approach, that I could have books that people could read in an afternoon or in a day and gain the knowledge that way. If they wanted more, I could teach a course, and I do still teach a lot of courses. Every day I work on online courses, and then have a few Zoom meeting or in-person courses as well. And then finally consulting, right? If you need someone to help you actually do it and get in there, I can do that as well. And I'm just very happy to be able to help so many project managers by doing this.
I know you mentioned aspiring PMs, but you are, based on your career and history and experiences, you are what would inspire us to become. And I say that because your professional journey, how you've outlined it right now, is exactly the journey I want to have in my own, selfishly in my own career, right? Something where I'm still gaining the knowledge. I'm only a decade into my experience, so program and project management, gaining the knowledge. But the beauty of our community, the PM community, is that it's really built on those shared experiences. And to your point, just kind of sharing that knowledge in any format that you can, whether it's online courses, whether you're in person, whether you're creating quick reads in the books that you publish. But Ray, you've done so much for our community so far. So first and foremost, I just want to say you're an inspiration, and thank you for what you've put out so far and helping educate all of us to be better PMs.
That's been my pleasure.
So let's dig a little bit into the title of your book, right? Because I I love it, by the way. Accidental Project Manager, Zero to Hero in 7 days. That's an awesome illustration as well. You had countless conversations with fellow project managers, and I think based on the conversations I've had with my colleagues, it's always been, did you plan your path as a PM, or did you fall into it? And most of the cases I know of, they've fallen into it and they've become what you're talking about, an accidental project manager. What inspired you to write this book, as well as come up with such a great title for the book?
Okay, great. Well, that's a great question. So I was actually teaching a class. This was around 2015. It was the fourth time I'd taught it, and it was called a project management certificate program. And it was offered by our local community college district, but it was actually, the certificate was issued by the state of California. So it was a state of California approved curriculum. And the general class, right, I'd have maybe anywhere between 40 and 60 students at a time. And it was a 120-hour program. Usually they were accidental project managers. They were people who worked for nonprofits,
Yeah.
small businesses. And the program actually eventually branched off into a small business program as well, because there were so many people in small businesses
Oh,
that
wow.
needed project management help that came to the program. So it was all people who needed some level of project management training, but they didn't need earned value management. They didn't have to know how to draw activity on node diagrams. They didn't
Got it.
have to know all these advanced concepts. And so when I teach, they'd just be sitting like, totally unaware of what was going on. It was just really difficult.
Sure.
And fortunately, it was a non-credit, non-graded program. But then after I started meeting them after the class again, because they'd come back for other training, or we'd have some alumni meetings, and I had an opportunity to talk to them, and most of that knowledge was forgotten. And so I started thinking
Yeah.
about, what's the journey of a project manager? Well, first of all, you don't get into project management just out of college. Right? You have to kind of grow into the position or be cast into it eventually. And so I figured really what helps these people is to figure that this is a 3 to 6 year journey, right? So if they want, they can get the CAPM in a year or two, depending on their pace, right? You can even do it as little as 2 months if you wanted to. But then to get the PMP, you need that 3 to 6 years of experience. And a lot of people don't realize that. So we can pace out their education. We don't have to give it to them through a fire hose all at once.
Right.
And give them all that knowledge at one time. So what I set out to do was develop a book that had the bare minimum that a new and aspiring and accidental project manager could use and put to work immediately. And I did that by looking at PMI competency studies and competency surveys and figuring out what are the bare minimum topics, what's the least common denominator. I guess I know that construction managers need some specialized training that software development project managers don't need, and vice versa, but there is a common denominator that would be beneficial to all. And so I started narrowing that down. And then I actually fortuitously met someone who I had known years before as a PMI volunteer. His name was Dr. John Estrella, and he became my book mentor and business mentor overall. And we brainstormed together and came up with the project acronym, and used that as the basis for the book, and then started to fill in these pieces so that we could put together a whole program. That's how it was born. Once I had this time to think about what people really needed, and get this acronym underway. Writing the book was a breeze, right? We did all the, like good project managers, we did all the planning up front, and then execution was relatively easy. And so at the end of 2018, I had published that book. And in 2020, we actually did an agile version of that.
Yes, which I am also looking forward to picking up. And you make a few good points there, Ray, in terms of there was that group that inspired you that already had some of some, if not all of the kind of PM foundational skill sets that you need to have to start to take on more projects. But you talked about the journey too, that it's just not something you start right away and you're great at. I mean, maybe there are those instances, but you talked about how the journey is multiple years, 3 years, 6 years, and you hit these milestones within your own career. And I think that's really important for people to understand that are listening, especially for those that are aspiring to be project managers, that it's a practice. And I think you and I can probably attest to the fact that you continue to evolve and get better and grow in it. And the beauty of your book is that you make a small assumption, right? That people who read it have either some sort of project management experience or passion for it, or just like a base level knowledge. But then you add on to that, which is great. You add on to it and in such a practical and realistic way that people can read this, to your point, in like maybe a day, because it is a very, very easy and quick read, and it's really informational for all the information that you get out of this, and like the limited amount of pages that you're able to fit it in, Ray. And you walk away with something really, really tangible that you can use in your own professional career and your either your day-to-day even. There's a lot of great tips in there. And so I just want people to understand that while you can start as a project manager, just set the expectations that you'll still want to continue to practice and grow. And I think this is such a great supplemental resource, this Accidental PM book, for you to, even if you've been in your career for a few years now, just pick up and refresh yourself as well.
Yeah, I think, my philosophy is we really need to tap the brakes on some of these accelerated certification and certificate programs and build the knowledge over time. Because again, the retention from learning is, and the practice that you get in the skills is what helps you become a proficient project manager. You're not going to get that overnight. And yeah. Frankly, you're going to devalue your certification or your certificate if you rush it and you don't demonstrate results to your employer.
Yeah.
Right? And so
yeah, exactly.
I see so many programs accelerating, and it's really, getting that in the first 6 months of your career. What are you going to do for the rest of the 6 years?
Yeah,
you
that's
really
exactly
need to
it.
continue to learn, right? So space it out over time. You don't need to get it all at once, and you'll retain the information better. I'm reading a book right now called Make It Stick, right?
Oh,
to learn what it is that helps retention. And it's really that deliberate practice and not necessarily repetition, but practice and elaboration. Being able to describe what you're doing to others in other words, not just memorizing or repeating something, right?
Exactly.
That really makes the retention high.
And you really solidified. We actually had a debate, Ray, in our master's program. So I went to USC for the MSPM program, and there was a good debate about does the certification make you a project manager, or is it, as you're saying, the practice and the growth of it through time? And I really do fall on that side of the argument that if you come out of your 1 year and you get a PMP, is that going to be as valuable to you if let's say you waited another 2 or 3 years to get it and really understand more and more of the work and the concepts that we have to live through? So again, it's kind of, where do you stand on the side of the argument there? But I'm happy to hear your perspective on it as well. So Ray, I'm curious, are you an accidental project manager, or did you plan your path to project management?
So actually, I was the exact opposite. I had I had a plan and a lot of support from an employer, and that's what I would encourage people to look for, those opportunities. I worked in an environment where we were asked every year, what do you want to do when you grow up? And part of my idea was I saw management, I saw project management as a stepping stone to management. I thought this is something that I wanted to do. I've always been a bit entrepreneurial. And so I told my manager one year, I'm interested in project management and I'd like to do that. So I had some training opportunities, and then they started a big project where the project manager was a little overwhelmed. And so they allowed me to come in as a shadow or an assistant to kind of help out. That gave me some experience. And I did that for about a year. Then that project manager left. I took over that project. And eventually I grew into a full manager because they liked the work that I had done and we needed to do more of it. And so I got more resources, more people, essentially managed a small business unit then of about 7 to 10 people that worked on various projects that were all related, but sort of had me at the helm and helping them in their careers as well, helping them understand that I was there to help them become better employees and project managers if that's what they wanted to do, or help them, in whatever direction they wanted their career to go. And I think that ties back to my dual career because I worked a lot with interns. I was always the person who hired all the interns. If I could give someone a job for the summer and they could do something useful, why not? And not all my colleagues saw it that way, but I always managed to land a few interns for the summer to help with our projects as well. So
yeah,
it's just something I've always done.
it sounds like you have such a great mentality of this kind of pay it forward as you learned and you grew in your position, that you created opportunities for people to also follow this PM path if they were so inclined to. And it also sounds like you created an environment where people can go into the role, test it out. If they don't like it, great. If you do, it sounds like you were very supportive of them. I encourage everyone that's listening, if you are in a point of your career where you're interested in PM, but you're not in a PM titled role yet, ask for those opportunities. I think to your point, you asked for it and you had such a great support system to get you to where you wanted to be, Ray. And I think for many of us, that sometimes it's just a intimidation factor where we're afraid to ask for the things that we want, but without asking, we might never get there on our own. So it's nice to hear your story and how you were able to follow the path of PM versus falling into it as an accidental PM. So it's nice to hear the variations of how everyone becomes their version of a project manager. So thank you for sharing that.
And I could tell you, speed didn't matter for me. I didn't learn about the PMP until I was 20 years into it.
Wow.
And so what I did is I thought, well, I don't know that I need any more training, but I'll pick up a PMP exam prep review book and I'll go through it. And what I found out is there was still a lot for me to learn. There were still some areas that, because of the types of projects I had managed in my various circumstances, like I didn't have a lot of experience with procurement, didn't have to create budgets a lot. And so there were like 4 or 5 areas where I needed to study a little bit more so that I could pass. And then I did on the first attempt, right? But there's no need to rush it, right? 20 years was just fine for me. And it'll work for a lot of people as well. Don't feel that you have to get that certificate or certification. It's more important to get the experience and be a really good project manager. And I think that's what served me well. That was my focus throughout my career.
I love that piece of advice. And speaking of, growing into a great project manager, you do provide a lot of practical advice and tips and that sort of thing in your book. You touched on that briefly, but I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit to the details of the Accidental Project Manager book in terms of the acronym that you used, which if I don't know if I'm the only learner that likes acronyms, but I think some of the things that I have always remembered from even grade school were associated with some way to remember them. And I think acronyms is such a great way to learn. And so can you talk through, the details of how you utilize project in the book for our audience?
Sure. So, basically using the word project and really fits well because that's what you're doing. It's hard. It's a hard to forget acronym. And I'll just quickly walk through what each letter stands for,
Sure.
if that's okay. So the P is for people. And as I thought about, what new project managers need, you see a lot of statistics about project failure being users weren't consulted or there were requirements issues. But when you think about it and you apply the 5 whys and get down to the real root cause, it's really people. It's the decisions they make and the actions they take. So project managers need to really know how to work with people. And so in that chapter, I stress stakeholder management, getting to know who they all are, not missing some, because I've had people get angry because they weren't invited to a project meeting they thought they should have. Right? There are all sorts of roadblocks those people will throw up. And then also to think about the team that you're going to have, because project managers, especially when they start out, I didn't get to pick my team. My manager said, okay, my manager said, okay, I'm the functional manager. These are the people who report to me. These are the people, Ray, you're going to work with. I didn't have a whole lot of choice. And so I had to learn to work with everyone, even people who I might not have gotten along with otherwise. We didn't have to be best friends. We just had to have a good professional working relationship together and be professional and resolve conflict in a positive and constructive way. So, that's what I try to get through in the people part, because I think that's an important foundational element.
Absolutely.
Then the R is for requirements. And here I emphasize the fact that, well, first of all, when you're a new project manager and you're on a small project, chances are that you're going to have some extra duties. You're not just going to be just the project manager. And very often for me, working in the software world at the time, that meant I had to do the requirements as well. And so I stress here that people have to really dig for requirements, that the requirements always aren't on the tip of the stakeholder's tongue, right? They need help. And so rather than call it collecting or gathering requirements, the term I like to use is very purposeful. It's elicit requirements. We need to draw them out of the people we're dealing with. And once we get good requirements, that's halfway to solving the problem and getting the project. So I also then talk about what are the three good requirements techniques to start with. I know there are dozens, but in an afternoon, when I want people to read it in the afternoon, there are 3 that really stick out for me, which was documentation, review, interviews, and observation. So I go into those in a little bit of detail, talk to them about some common elicitation problems, and then kind of wrap that up with some signs that elicitation is complete, because you can just keep talking to people forever. You've really got to bring it to a close at some point. And there's some signs that you're close and should start wrapping it up and getting on to the next phase, right? And so that's the R for requirements. Then once you have requirements, then I talk about organizing objectives. And that typically will start with a kickoff meeting, a project kickoff meeting. I know that there are lots of different ways to structure projects, but I think for the new project manager, this is a great thing to start with. And once you complete that, then develop a work breakdown structure together and as a team activity. And so this organized chapter goes through having the kickoff meeting immediately after doing the work breakdown structure, and then turning that work breakdown structure without a tool, just pencil, paper, common sense, creating it into a simple project or a milestone plan. For a lot of my small projects, I didn't even create a milestone plan. I used something that I think is in the roots of Six Sigma called a 3Ws work plan. Who, what, when, and status. Right? Just a 4-column format that was similar to the milestone plan that I presented in the book, that gives you a very easy way to track a plan, arrange it as necessary, account for risks, account for various problems that you might encounter, and still yet get a solid roadmap. I liken this to a roadmap. When you're done planning, you have a roadmap that's going to take you from where you are to delivering a completed project. And so, I encourage people to map that all out as best as possible, because that's going to get you to a successful project. So once I get through the organization, then I talk about gelling with the team, right? Because as things move on, you've really got to get to work with the team well, got to get to know them well, got to get, you might not initially, but as work progresses, you've got to take some steps to doing that. I present them with a really good exercise to get to know people without necessarily taking a personality test or using what I think a lot of people overuse the Myers-Briggs. It is a good way to start a conversation, but it's not really scientific. And so I use what I call the dream trip as an exercise to do some team building. The other thing that I emphasize at this point is that acknowledgement is really important in team building and trust building. Right? These are a couple of things that will get you quickly to a high-performing team. Most teams that I've worked with have within a year become high-performing teams, because I try to hit all these elements again and again as I build teams, and I found it very successful in getting to the point where I can step away as the project manager for a few days to work on other work and things to plan the future. And I'm confident that the work will continue when I'm not there, right? That the team is going to move forward. And then I think the other thing that I try to cover in this chapter is working with virtual teams, right? And I didn't realize it at the time, but that's very important now. I'm still amazed. I'm surprised that people aren't more familiar with virtual teams, but I actually started working with a virtual team in the late 1970s. So it's not a new concept. It's things that some of us have had to do throughout our careers. And so I tried to bring in some of my experiences with working with virtual teams and share it in this chapter as well.
That's great.
I think it's really important to know.
You predicted the future, Ray. I mean, so relevant right now. So hence you and I on this Zoom call. So yes.
So, I think once you've got that roadmap, once you've got the team solidified, then you really want to execute. And for me, execution has always been the easiest part of project management, because I have a good roadmap. I'm going to measure our progress on it every week, but that doesn't take but a few hours to a day or two, depending on the size of the project. And so during execution, that's when project managers need to pull out all the stops on soft skills, be able to really work with people and be able to get things done, be able to overcome hurdles and roadblocks that are in the way and help the team do that. So in this chapter, I emphasize 4 soft skills. I've seen anywhere between 10 and a dozen or more that are cited as the soft skills project managers need, but I like to keep it down to the small number. And so I emphasize delegation, follow-up, giving feedback, and holding people accountable, right? Those are the 4 key soft skills that I think people need at that point in the project. And so those are the ones that I go through in a little more detail for that chapter. Then in parallel, we have to control projects that's related, and there's often kind of a blur between execution and control. The one, I made lots of mistakes as a new project manager back many years ago. And one of them was to get excited when we were just maybe a few dollars over budget or a few hours over schedule, right? And it was, oh, how am I going to fix this? What have I got to do? And I wasted a lot of time thinking about that. What I realized is that over time, if you have a good roadmap, you meet some of the milestones, you exceed some of them, or you get some of them done quicker. And that over time, if you have a really good plan, that works out really well. What you really need to be focused on, is there a negative trend? Am I falling behind week over week? Or has there been a big spike? Like suddenly something got discovered in the middle of the week that said, oh, this is going to take 5 times more than we predicted. Those are the things that I need to jump on and figure out how to work with. I don't have to worry about the little variances that occur from day to day within the projects. And so that's what I try to get across here, as well as having a knowledge of what those basic corrective actions are. There's only a few things you can do, technically, really.
Yeah.
And also, getting good status reports, just keeping people informed about what's happening and what's going on. And so that's what we cover there. And then finally, the last chapter, the T is transfer and transform, right? So what I found is that you have a year-long project, you're delivering it, the project sponsor has forgotten everything about all those arguments you had months before, all the struggles, all the nail biting, all that's forgotten when it comes time to deliver the project and you've delivered a good project. So, if you really want to focus on one area, it's to do a good transfer, to close out the project really strong. Don't leave loose ends. Take care of the training, take care of the documentation, put that work in your plan. I can't tell you how many class exercises I've given out over the years. People, our project is going to be a class picnic. Okay, great. Well, the picnic ends when everybody eats. And it's like, well, what's going to happen? Who's going to clean the dishes? Who's going to clean up the park, right? That all gets forgotten. So I really want to emphasize here that closeout is important. You need to think about what you're going to do to close out your project and do it well, because again, that's what you're really going to be remembered for, right? And then another thing that's a little bit contrary that I've practiced throughout my career is I always understood that project managers are always in the middle. They're in the middle of something, somewhere, somehow. And that they're particularly in the middle when it comes to managing people. And one of the things that happens is, again, depending on your employer, you may work with the same people again on the next project. And so you really want to have a good ending for them as well. And yet it's not my responsibility to do performance appraisals. Well, I found out that managers, and I was no exception as a manager, managers hate to do performance appraisals. They just don't, they find them time consuming, right? So what I did as a project manager is I developed a very nice little plan to do it. I only asked 4 questions, like strengths, weaknesses, what training should they get for the next project, and what should we emphasize for them on the next project. Just a few simple questions, put it in writing, forget all those numerical scales. I can't tell you the number of employees, myself included, right, who argued whether we were a 4.5 or a 4.6 and missed the whole purpose of the feedback, right, in doing it. And so it's like, write a few sentences. So I wrote a 1-page document and I went to my manager and said, I know this isn't my responsibility, but I know I'm going to have to work with these people again. And I wanted to give you some feedback on them. And of course, I always emphasized the positive, always kept it positive looking. And so I just kind of handed it to them without any expectation that it would be used. But 9 times out of 10, they would either file it away in the employee file of that person, and then I'd find out later through the grapevine that got used in somebody's performance appraisal.
Oh,
They
wow.
would tell me, thanks for that feedback that you gave our manager, or they'd ask me to deliver it themselves. And that was just another foot in the door for me as management, because when it came time for a group of managers to decide who they're going to promote, they wanted the guy who helped them with their
Mhm.
hardest task, or what they perceived as one of their hardest tasks.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and that became a promotional opportunity for me. So, I think this is a great time to, come with a clean closeout, be ethical. I've had projects that weren't 100% successful, but my approach to that was what won over people, right? And got us to fix it either in another project phase or another project in the future. It just created opportunity to fix it without putting a bad taste in the client's mouth that,
Yeah.
Ray told us we were going to save $5 million by this project, but we've saved all of $10 and we're not getting anywhere. They don't want to find that out after they've been delivered the project. They want to know that up front. What
Oh,
are the
sure.
limits, right?
Yeah,
To have
absolutely.
it. So that's the project acronym. I have to give a lot of thanks to John Estrella for helping me come up with that. And I came up with, we worked on the wordsmithing of what exactly we were going to call each one. But he was the one who said, let's call it project. Let's figure out what we can do with that.
Yeah.
And that got us to a great acronym.
Absolutely. It's so insightful. And thank you for kind of taking us through the meat and potatoes of,
Sure.
of the book. And it's one of those things for me where I've been doing this for a little while now. And it still is a book that will absolutely resonate with people who are currently functioning in a project or program manager role, that you've been doing this for a few years. You give such, again, practical advice that I can take, tools that I can use. You talked about how you do your reviews with your peers, and you offer that as kind of an additional service that you provide, which I think is wonderful. And it really does create some sort of transparency and authenticity between those that you have to work with and yourself. And again, knowing that you're going to work with them again, it just helps create such a healthy relationship. And I love that idea. I love the fact that you're essentially running mini postmortems on your team and providing that in such a meaningful and constructive manner, that I am not surprised that it's come up after the fact that that advice or that guidance or that feedback has been used by those people. So, Ray, this has been such a wonderful experience learning from you, hearing from you on the inspiration from the book, your experiences in your professional journey, and ultimately all of the things that wrap up into the Accidental Project Manager 0 to Hero in 7 days. I highly recommend people pick this up. And as Ray said, it's such a quick read and something that I imagine I will revisit over and over again, because you always continually want to refresh yourself on these knowledge areas. And the way that you've laid it out is just so easy to remember as well, Ray. So thank you for your time today. Is there anything else you want to impart on our listeners?
No, first of all, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I hope that you, as well as other project managers that will eventually become responsible for managing other project managers, will use this. Because I think the day of the accidental project manager should be limited. This is, again, one of those many causes of project failure that we hear, right? Oh, it was an accidental project manager that was in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not do that. Let's figure out a better way to grow people's careers, give them more job satisfaction. I mean, when you have happy employees, happy managers, happy customers, right? Everybody prospers.
Yeah.
Everybody does well, and everybody is successful. And I have to thank my early environment for that, right? That was what created a lot of the structure around my thinking, but I've always carried it forward and tried to put it into practice in all of my work. So thanks, Anne. Really appreciated the opportunity to be here.
I love it. So inspiring. And hopefully everyone listening is also very, very inspired by what Ray had to share with us today on the Everyday PM. So that will do it for this installment of the Everyday PM podcast. Ray, where can people continue the conversation with you if they want to follow you or chat with you more online?
Oh, well, that's a great question. My website is accidentalpm.online, and there are multiple ways to contact me there. And my email is rayf@ppcgroup.us. And I would encourage any listeners who wanted to ask questions, just get in touch with me. I just enjoy interacting with the people who've read the book, and it gives me ideas for the future books that I do. So really enjoy hearing from people.
And thank you for being so accessible, Ray. And for those that don't follow Ray on LinkedIn as well, I do. And Ray puts out such great content on LinkedIn, simple tips, reminders, again, a lot of practical advice that you can take forward. And I just love the content that you're putting on LinkedIn as well. So make sure to follow him there. You can also follow me on LinkedIn as well, and Campea. Support the podcast by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcasting platform you are listening in on. We're just about available on them all. Spotify, Google Play, Anchor, you name it, we should be on there. Give us a thumbs up, give us a great review. You can also watch this video version so you can see Ray and I in this on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ann Campea. Make sure you click like, make sure you leave us a comment, what you thought about this video, and take a second to subscribe to the channel as well so you can know when new content is up. So Ray, thank you again for your time today. And thank you everyone who has been listening and joining us on this video version as well. That will do it for Ray and I. Thank you so much. Until next time, take care.